As far
maybe
as
they
the
restarted.
Twitter files are
Yeah.
concerned, so I watched some of your conversation with Destiny. I didn't get a chance to get through all of it
I was
because
about to say it
it's
was bad content. It was very slow, but it was slow
no, no, no,
because we
no.
had a good conversation.
No, I'm a geek for that shit. That is my wheelhouse. I don't do like the drama stuff. Like even that with the initial conversation with you and Wicked
Was
Supreme
rough.
and Cherry and Aaron and everybody, I contributed the least amount to it other than trying to get the conversation back onto the Twitter files because it's just not my jam. I like to keep any sort of personal dispute I have with a person online or offline in private and not litigate it to the world, which makes me a very shitty content creator in terms of that sort of thing. But so no, you're in my wheelhouse. I just haven't had the time because I've been doing my own stuff on the channel.
Sure.
But my understanding is it was a really good conversation. Did you guys achieve any sort of consensus, or was it just kind of a clarification of position?
So what we landed on basically. What, you need a hug or something?
I'm good, thank you.
No, hold on one sec. What's up?
Yeah, you're fine.
Going to bed?
Mm.
All right. I gotta play for 5 more minutes. All right. I love you. Have fun. All right. So,
Your son was like, "I want to contribute to the Twitter files. I have so much to say on this right now."
nah.
Yeah.
He's hopefully we can keep him away from this autistic political shit, but probably not because he's very similar to me. But where we landed, so I felt like in the first conversation, what was really frustrating to me was I was like, "Hey, Destiny, we agree on like 75% of our descriptive claims. We're just extrapolating out this last like 10%, 25%." And he like rejected that multiple times. He's like, I don't believe what you believe, blah, 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 blah. But this was kind of us coming at the descriptive claims from like each other's end, where he's saying this is justified. These people aren't acting with malice. This is just kind of the way that it works. They're acting in good faith based off of what I can see and based off of the communications that you're showing me. These are not like evidence of malice. And I was like, okay, these aren't evidence of malice, but if you like, I never expect to find a text message that's like, hey, I hate Trump and we're going to bury the Hunter Biden story so that
I mean,
Trump
Peter Strzok
does not
sent those
achieve.
messages.
Yeah,
I mean, so
exactly.
they might be out there. You know?
Okay,
Yeah.
but here's the thing. So like, people kind of meme and they're like, well, Connor, all you do and all Rob Noor does say, isn't it funny? And yeah, I am saying, isn't it funny? But isn't it funny that Elvis Chan was a subordinate to Peter Strzok, and then Jim Baker, who's the executive who was pushing for the story to get, kind of like slowed down or modified or marked as misinformation or whatever the fuck, he was Peter Strzok's peer. They worked together on Russian disinformation. So you can say like, oh, this is just like, this is every day. But for me, it's like, why is a FBI field agent who was subordinate to Peter Strzok, who hated Trump, and why is the former general counsel of the FBI deciding how and when Americans consume news information? That's my frustration.
Let me say this because I don't know if Destiny ever copped to this or said this, but I can tell you from my end, I don't mind your skepticism. I really don't, because this idea that we can't question things or have hypotheses or make even inferences, on things, is just not. I mean, we all do it. We all read into the intent of other actors in our personal lives and political. Everybody does it all the time. Now, I do think you have an obligation as a debater to be careful about how you phrase it publicly, like, which I think you have. I think you've copped to the fact you can't prove this. I think you've owned it. You can't prove this beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you were in court, you'd lose. You'd probably never make the case in the first place. It's just your inference based on your background and based on suspicious connections or questionable connections that you see in this story. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say, but that's where, for me, I would be saying, based off of the available evidence, I would be submitting subpoenas. And then that's where I get offended that like people are like, oh, it's a nothing burger. It's like, well, to me, it's not a nothing burger. These people they have obvious conflicts of interest in reference to this story. I want to see if this is incompetence or if this is nefarious. And I would chase that lead down to the fucking earth.
So do you think you would have gotten the kind of pushback that you got if you'd said, look, this seems like it could be a bit sketch. So seems like it could be sketchy, sussy, suspicious, whatever.
Sure.
And therefore, it deserves further investigation given the potential implications. If you'd
Yeah,
phrased it like that, do you think you would have gotten as much pushback as you
of
did?
of course I wouldn't have gotten as much pushback, but that's where we started. So you got to figure in the conversation. Mind Waves, the next day, he was a part of the conversation. He only threw an elbow or two, so he wasn't like a huge contributor. But he
Right.
called me like a flat earther on Twitter the following day. What was it? Supreme said that even if I was vindicated, he wouldn't care because I didn't have enough compelling evidence at the time. So he just like pretty much absolutely dismissed everything I had to say, even if my inferences ended up being validated. You shouldn't trust me
Well,
at
you
all.
understand where, well, to be fair, you understand where he's coming from there. The idea that he was under the impression, and I think we all were, that you were making an argument. And if it turns out later that
Hmm.
your conclusions were valid, but your premises and the facts you got to get there weren't substantiated at the time, it's almost like how, how broken clock is right twice a day. I think it's fair to
Sure.
say, hey, look, you may very well be right in the end, Connor, if this were investigated further, but that doesn't vindicate the argument that you made at the time. You would accept that,
Sure.
right? That's fair to
No,
say.
okay. Listen, I do accept that, but at the same time, like I don't accept that they were. And by the way, I'm not saying that you're saying this.
Right.
I'm just saying like this was the conversation. The conversation was, hey guys, I think based off of the available evidence, I think the FBI buried or modified the Hunter Biden story in order to not fuck over Joe Biden. And then I was basically called like an idiot and a conspiracy theorist for like a couple hours. You know what
Among
I'm saying?
among other things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were
So
beaten around like a piñata.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and like obviously I got heated. I didn't argue well. I didn't have any evidence to substantiate my points, like all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, I didn't think because in like maybe I'm just so much more blackpilled on institutions than everybody else is. I didn't think that we were going to get the evidence that we ended up getting. Like I never thought that we were going to get Twitter internal communiques or we were going to get like Jim Baker trying to go over the emails that were going out to reporters about the Twitter files. I never thought any of that stuff would be disclosed. I just thought that it would be a conspiracy theory. It would die down in a couple of months. Nobody would give a shit and the entire country would move on. So the fact that we even got half of what we got is still impressive to me.
Well, let me ask you. So, taking what you say at face value about about things that look potentially suspicious or sketchy or whatnot. How you can reasonably read an inference into this that's kind of sinister, even if you can't prove it or even substantiate it all that well. What do you think of people? Let me give you an analogy. What do you think of people who do the same with the so-called Russiagate investigations? Like, if somebody says, Connor, I think that Donald Trump absolutely colluded with Russia. I can't prove it, but we know that members of the Trump campaign and the Trump administration had very inappropriate relationships with state actors, including Rudy Giuliani. There were multiple indictments. Multiple times, Trump publicly invited Russia to interfere. Hey, Russia, if you're watching, hack Hillary's emails now.
I saw that interview. It was a shit post, but it was a retarded shit post. Like I actually watched that entire interview. Like I watched it live actually. So he was kind of like memeing, riffing with the cameras and all that kind of stuff. And then he was like kind of like, hey, Russia, like Hillary lost a bunch of emails. So if you have them, go ahead and
Do you
make them
think he was
public.
being insincere? You don't
No,
think
no.
Donald?
I think if like Russia did a hack and they released all the emails and it ended up being damning for Hillary Clinton, he would welcome it with open arms. Absolutely.
So
So
fair enough, and I do too. But if somebody said that to say, okay, I take what you say about the Twitter files at face value, but I raise you the Trump situation, would you say, okay, yeah, fair enough, it's
yeah,
reasonable
I would
to
literally say
infer?
warrants an investigation. That's exactly what I would say. And by the way, like I have been. That was one of the funny things about that debate is I have been pretty much like anti-Trump since 2015. And
Right.
the thing that I was anti-Trump on was the McCain. Like you can hate John McCain. I don't give a shit if you hate John McCain. But John McCain was a fighter pilot. He served in Vietnam. He got
He
shot down.
denigrated his service.
Yeah, he got shot down. He had his fingers broken in like a North Vietnamese jail. He had an opportunity to use his status as a senator's son in order to escape. He didn't want that to be used for propagandistic purposes, so he stayed. And he also as far as I remember, I think from his memoir, he was saying he was worried that if he left, the conditions for the other prisoners of war would worsen because there wouldn't be any public attention on their conditions. So he was
Right.
basically worried that other human beings would, like, he's already getting his fucking fingers broken. What's going to happen to these guys that nobody gives a shit about as soon as he leaves? So he stayed. And then for that to be shit on, where it's like, oh, well, I like soldiers and airmen who weren't even captured. And it's like, bitch, like, didn't you fucking dodge the draft like
You got a
twice?
deferment because
Didn't
of a bone spur or something like that.
listen,
Yeah.
didn't at least like George W. Bush, didn't he at least serve in the Air National Guard a couple of weekends, you know?
Yeah.
Like, fuck you, you fucking pussy. So anyways, so Donald Trump lost me
I
there.
know you're not a Trump stan, and so and that's why I figured it would be an easy concession to make. But
Yeah.
but what's interesting is the people, the vast majority of conservatives I encounter online or offline who take the Twitter files at face value, read the worst possible interpretation of it, would never apply that same sort of, and I don't mean this as an insult, but conspiratorial thinking towards like Trump's relationship with Russia. They would say, no, there's no proof that he colluded, therefore you can't assume that he did. But it's like, well, if you, I feel like it's fairly reasonable based on what we do know. Again, the multiple indictments, multiple inappropriate relationships, with Trump's own personal record of corruption, blah, 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 all these things. I think it's fair to assume that, but there's a double standard. You reject that double standard, right? You would think it's fair.
I don't have that double standard at all. As a matter of fact, so like Hunter Biden peddling influence and doing cocaine and banging whores and all that kind of shit. Like, I don't pretend for a fucking second that the daughters and sons of senators and congressmen, probably like half of them are really hardworking doctors, lawyers, lobbyists, just average Americans. The other half of them are probably like fail son degenerate pieces of shit who fucking traffic in the clout and money of their parents in order to get away with whatever the fuck they can.
They use nepotism. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, like, knowing people like that in my personal and professional life, like Hunter Biden isn't doing anything different than the rest of the fail sons of sitting senators and congressmen. He just got caught. And then not only did he get caught, but there's corroborative evidence that he was like peddling influence, doing drugs, banging whores, inappropriate like things when it comes to money, using his dad's name in order to gain clout and influence and all that kind of shit. And for me to have people be like, well, Trump's worse, it's like, okay, I can say that Trump's worse and still say, if you fuck up publicly this bad as a public figure related to a powerful public figure, you should be investigated.
I think the frustration is, Connor, that Hunter Biden has been investigated multiple times. He's been investigated by Senate Republicans before the 2020 election. They couldn't find any evidence of a crime for him or Joe Biden. He's been investigated by the FBI under Obama. It continued under Trump. And as a matter of fact, that investigation under a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney has been allowed to continue under Biden. So Hunter Biden's been investigated like 3 times, and now that you have Congress investigating him again, that's 4 times. How many times has Jared Kushner been investigated for a $2 billion deal that he inked with the Saudis, even though he has no relevant real estate experience, even though he was the primary contact with the Saudis under the Trump administration? And unlike Hunter Biden, he was a government official. Jared Kushner should be scrutinized 10 times as much as Hunter Biden, and the evidence of Jared Kushner's crimes are much more important. Why aren't people talking about that?
Well, okay, so I'll tell you why, and this is why I think there's been 4 investigations. This is why I think the FBI thought that they could bury the story and nobody would give a shit. This is why I think it's because everyone does it. I think that's why. I think that like all sitting there's probably no laws against the private members of sitting elected officials' families making dickloads of money off of internal information that they're not supposed to have, and it's probably an open fucking secret that these people leverage their fucking information for personal fucking profit and gain. And by the way, like before you say like nah or whatever, which I'm not saying you're going to, but like Dianne Feinstein, like it's just open. It's just like an open record that she has been invited to like half a dozen IPOs, like initial public offerings for stock companies that basically she's in charge of regulating. And because she's or her husband's a private citizen, he's allowed to buy whatever fucking stocks he wants. And he went, I think wait, it's not Feinstein. It's,
you're thinking Pelosi.
Pelosi. So, yeah. Pelosi. So they've been invited to all these, IPOs. And basically, as a direct result of the IPOs, I think they went from like a individual family worth of 3 million to like 200. You know what I'm saying? Like how? So for me, like you're pointing it out, and you're like, okay, you got Hunter Biden being a piece of shit, but this isn't illegal. It's like for me, I think all these motherfuckers are doing it. I think that's why there's no indictments. That's why I think there's no follow up. That's why I think they're not banging their hands on the table saying this is corrupt and this is evil. You are using your clout and influence in order to make tens of millions of dollars to the benefit of your personal family. Fuck you, you're a piece of shit and you should be barred from office. The reason why they're not doing that is because they're doing that with their fucking kids.
Right. Well, I think they are doing that. They're just doing it when it's the opposition. I just think it's interesting that the one guy who has been investigated 4 times and is now going to be investigated again was never a member of the United States government. And the amount of money he made, or potentially off his nepotism and corruption, is a fraction of a fraction of what Jared Kushner's raking in. And he was a member of the United States government under the Trump administration. So it's just the asymmetry is frustrating. But and I know we've only got about 10 minutes, but the only thing I wanted to do here, and we may have time later or another day to go into deeper details, and I don't know if you resolved any of this with Destiny, so it may very well be that I'm just kind of...
Dude, we can run this back. Like, I figured you and me fucking vibe. Crowdsource Politics is in chat. I have a feeling that you and him would probably vibe too.
Oh, he's a good dude. Yeah. Cypher. Yeah, he's a good.
Yeah.
He's solid
So I
dude.
mean, we could run this back, one, because we didn't get to talk as much as we wanted to talk about, and then two, we should probably do like a pop culture nerd day. So yeah.
Yeah. No. So 100%. Well, then why don't we do this? Because I really do want to give it the attention it deserves. Would you mind if we revisit that?
We can run it now and we can run it later. I don't care. Just keep it in a notepad somewhere.
Yeah, I do. I've got it in a notepad, as a matter of fact, because I want to see. The other thing is, I don't know about you. Maybe you've done this on the Twitter file story so many times, but it's so easy to like lose track of like details and dates, and I get really sick and tired of doing that because like I'll catch myself like, well, the FBI had the laptop for 6 months. Actually, no, they had it for X number of years. Like, and it's me. And actually, this shit isn't just clerical. It's really important in establishing timelines and kind of illuminating all this stuff.
I have a pretty solid understanding of the timeline at this point because I was grilled on it super fucking hard.
Gotcha. When you say run it back, so again, like you have an obligation in 10 minutes, don't you?
Yeah, but I can still, if you wanted to say, hey, this is the part of the timeline that kind of fucking gets my noggin jogging, what do you think about that? Like, I don't care.
Well, let me say this then, because it'll also give you time to think about it and kind of respond here. So a couple of things. So you getting to the premise of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which I know we've talked about this before, but actually, no, I'll go with the more relevant stuff. So the thing about, you mentioned Elvis Chan earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You do know that Elvis Chan did testify under oath that he had no idea that the laptop was in the possession of the FBI. Do you buy that or you don't buy that?
No, I think it's entirely possible, but then this is where information siloing and it getting segmented and the intention of being what do you call it, like non-biased, ends up being worse. So there was a whistleblower in the FBI talks to a Republican. I'll have the article. It's a part of my response or whatever. But basically, let me give you the most charitable narrative I possibly can. Okay, this is my most charitable narrative. So my most charitable narrative is it's October of the previous year, before the election, and the FBI receives a laptop, and basically they do
December.
they do preliminary digital forensics on it, and they see that it's been tampered with after the files have been loaded. So they, according to like people who are trying to like verify the authenticity of the laptop, like they say like, hey, there's a bunch of fingerprints in here. Like it could have been the shop owner. It could be people who like hacked it. We don't know. We don't get it. We don't understand who's who, what's what. We don't know what's real and what's not. And we can corroborate XYZ information, but we can't corroborate ABC. Okay.
Well, see, so hang on. I want to stop you right there because that's really important. See, I don't. If you've got the source about whatever preliminary investigation the FBI did with the laptop, I'd love to have it, because in the months that I've been looking at this, I found no relevant information about what the FBI has or hasn't done with the laptop, because what you just said, as far as I know, that was from independent forensic analysis done by the Washington Post. The Washington Post hired 2 forensic analysts, and they determined from a copy of a hard drive they received from a Republican operative that there were additions or modifications to that copy of the hard drive after it was surrendered by Hunter Biden. So as far as I know, that wasn't done by the FBI. That was done by the press investigating it with forensic analysts.
Well,
That,
and
hey,
for me, that's almost worse because this gets to my next charitable moment. Okay.
okay,
So my let's say the FBI receives it, they take a look at it, they're like, we can't make fucking heads or tails of it, all right? Then this is from like an FBI whistleblower. You can just Google like FBI whistleblower Hunter Biden investigation or something like that. And a senator who's a Republican, of course he's biased. Of course he could say this just for shits and gigs, right? But he basically says that an FBI whistleblower called him directly and said, "Hey, we were told to bury the FBI Hunter Biden investigation and to not prioritize it because we would not be responsible for another kerfuffle like 2016." Where, if you remember, I forget if it's like James Comey or Mueller or whatever, whoever fucking announced that they were going to reopen the investigation into Hillary's fucking emails like 2 months before the election or some shit, right?
yeah,
So
2 weeks.
yeah, so the FBI was like, we're 1 year out, we're less than a year out. We are having no fucking impact on this shit. So we're doing that. That's not a pro for Trump, and that's technically not a pro for Biden. That's them saying, we don't want to fuck with this shit until we know it's not going to blow up on us. Now, to me, that technically favors like Biden a little bit, but I still think like a sober, reasonable, politically minded middle manager at the FBI could make that decision while actually having no preference over Trump or Biden, right? So with that second charitable thing done, so the FBI says, well, we're the only ones with a copy of the laptop. There was a January hack of Burisma, so it's entirely possible that between Trump focusing on Hunter as a point of corruption publicly, in the January hack of Burisma, there will be a Russian disinformation campaign leading up to the election that is based off of credible information completely unrelated to the laptop. Okay? And they could disseminate that information to Elvis Chan without Elvis Chan having any knowledge that the fucking laptop exists or it's in the FBI's possession. Okay? Then Elvis Chan running with the ball, just saying like, hey, Burisma got hacked. Trump talked a lot of shit about Hunter. We're going to, war game and talk to all the social media companies and all this kind of shit, get them ready for a Russian disinfo campaign. It's almost like a weather related event. It's like a hurricane, before an election, somebody's going to try to do an information campaign in October, right?
October surprise, yeah.
Right. So they think it's going to be Hunter. They war game it. It ends up being Hunter. And then with Elvis Chan not being malevolent, but trying to follow through on his job, and with the FBI kind of burying it, but not burying it because they like Trump, just because they didn't want to cause a political shitstorm before the election. All of that was done without malice. Okay? Let's just presume that charitably. My fucking beef with all of this is by siloing information, burying an investigation that should have been investigated anyways, by trying to be non-biased, they ended up showing bias. And then on top of that, they have Jim Baker, who's a former FBI general counsel at Twitter, who is the person pushing for the FBI fucking story to be discredited. That's my fucking problem. If this was like a private organization and they had siloed off their information and all that kind of shit, whatever, who gives a fuck? But they literally have a former employee counseling the fucking Twitter in order to fucking basically make the story seem like bullshit.
But how would he know? I don't think Baker wasn't in the FBI's employ when Hunter Biden's laptop was seized, right?
I don't know the timeline for that. I would have to know the timeline for that. But here's the other thing about that shit, though. Fucking, he was one of the few people with a top secret clearance, and I do have to go literally in 60 seconds.
Sure.
And we can run this back. I don't give a shit. So I'm not trying to like spread disinfo and then run.
That's exactly what he's doing, Chad. Yeah. I fell for his trap. He suckered me into an MCU chat. No, go ahead.
So Jim Baker has, because he's one of the few people with top secret fucking clearance at the FBI, he has a one-on-one meeting with the FBI like 2 weeks before the story drops. No civilian fucking Twitter employee is present. To me, I don't give a fuck if you're honest. That's fucked up. You know what I'm saying? So like, you got to clear up the conflict of interest. You have to make the meetings transparent. You have to stop fucking doing it. Like, we need to fucking get off the pot or shit in it in regards to what we're going to do when it comes to criminal investigations of our politicians. So that's where
Gotcha.
I'm at.
Well, let's set some time aside in the next. I'd like to do it like within the next like 7 days, next week or so,
Sure.
and really hash this out. And then eventually we're gonna have a pop culture conversation. But I do want to address all this stuff.
Fair. All right. Sounds
All right,
good.
buddy.
I'm going to jump into
All
the
right,
other
man.
call. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Talk to you
Catch you
later.
soon. And for those of y'all who don't know, that is Ruminate. We are going to jump into the other call now.
Hey you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.